Hey guys, it's Sensei Austin here, Seijuku Judo and Seijuku Enterprises. Just kind of want to talk about maturity for a second and really what the name of my businesses means. So Seijuku translates to maturity from Japanese into English. And, you know, when I created Seijuku Judo originally, I kind of had this idea of one day really serving like underprivileged teens and children, in my local neighborhood, and eventually all over the world, of course. That's really what I want to do. I feel like judo has a good basis, a strong foundation in maturity and, finding good ways to help people. Anyone that's practiced martial arts, whether Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or wrestling or Taekwondo, boxing, Muay Thai, anything really, you know, the, there is this understanding that things like discipline and hard work and personal courage and all these awesome values get naturally instilled in you through this practice. I mean, there's something about showing up to a dojo, a dojang, any of those terms, a gym, putting in the time on the mats, putting in the work. You know, as Jigoro Kano says, fall down 7, get up 8 times. And there's some natural life lessons with that. It's more than just fighting. It's more than just self-defense. I mean, don't get me wrong, all those things are great. They are. But there's more life lessons involved in martial arts than just how do I throw somebody or how do I punch. I started martial arts a little over 13 years ago now. And, funny enough, my father and stepmother, they actually, talked about me doing karate and taekwondo well before that, but I always blew it off. It wasn't really much of a conversation. They're like, oh, if you want to try it, you can. And I was kind of like, no, I don't want to do that. So I kind of thought it was silly. But when I was 15, my father recommended, hey, there's this Japanese jiu-jitsu thing, on Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And I was like, oh, it actually sounds interesting, and tried it out and fell in love with it. But the life lessons I learned, were much further reaching than I would have imagined. It actually, martial arts gave me all of my careers. I started, when I was 15 and, got me through high school. And uh, that combined with my father being a military man, I ended up joining the infantry, the National Guard, when I was 17. And did that for 5 years, and because of my background in martial arts and fitness and the military, I ended up doing law enforcement for a while. I was, in corrections, and I was a cop, and I did security for a while. And funny enough, all those things kind of together somehow got me into government contracting. And when I think back over time, career-wise, it all kind of lined up. But it all goes back to the lessons I learned in martial arts, showing up on time, being respectful to my peers, to my elders, being a good team player on the mat. All those things applied in the workforce, when, you're working with a coworker on a project, you don't want to be a jerk and, not do your part, right? You give it your best effort and you work hard. And, I was able to move up in rank in the military as well as, eventually work. For those of you that know me, at Booz Allen Hamilton for a while, and did the defense contractor thing for a short while, and didn't like it, so I ended up leaving it to pursue this full time. But still, even now, coming full circle, now that I'm doing the martial arts thing full time, those principles of showing up every day and giving it your all and being kind and working with people and living a life of service to others. Because when you step on the mats and you're a coach, again, it's more than just, hey, like, I'm going to teach you how to do an armbar or something like that. Parents, you're entrusting me with your children to instill good values into them. For those that are there when I teach at Aries Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Sanford, and I'll get on the kids, I'm like, what does Seijuku mean? They're like, maturity, that means something, that sparks something in their head, like, okay, if I'm acting up, is this really mature? Is this how a mature person would behave? But it also matters for adults too, when you're rolling and you want to give up and you're out of breath, is that what a mature person does? Do they quit? Do they quit on, the hard training that they're going through? Sometimes, when things hurt, and sure, there's nothing wrong with taking a break when you're hurt. Like, I hurt my knee a while ago, for those that, know me, and but eventually you come back, right? You bounce back stronger, you're resilient, and all those things are part of Seijuku. You know, speaking of her, I kind of think about three things, right? So three important stages in a martial artist's career, depending on how long, and everyone goes through this journey, right? When you first start, there's this moment where you get hurt. It's like in judo, you get slammed, or in jujitsu, all the times you get tapped, and maybe someone chokes a little too long, or someone arm bars a little too hard, or knee bars you for the first time, or whatever it is, right? It's that first kind of wake up call, like, oof, that hurt. This hurts. I got the wind knocked out of me, or maybe I sprained something. Maybe it's a more traumatic injury. Maybe you broke something. I don't know, but that first time where you really get hurt, do you bounce back? Do you get up? Do you keep training, or do you give up? And a lot of people quit after that. And hey, I understand it. It's hard to get hurt and keep going. But there's something about those that make it through that first hurdle, and those are the ones that's like, okay, they're gonna be martial artists. But those people are also the ones that kind of attack life, right? It's not just in martial arts where you bounce back up. There's that lesson of, man, like, you don't realize it, but you did this hard thing and recovered from that, and you're training. I mean, that training is more than just the mat, it's the rest of life, right? Well, there's that second stage where it's the first time you accidentally hurt someone else. And the two obviously go together, right? So someone accidentally hurts you, obviously there was someone that did hurt you, so they're in that second stage. They, did something and hurt you for the first time. And, you can kind of flip-flop them, I guess. Maybe you hurt somebody first, but it's not intentional. Because that's the thing about martial arts, right? It's about self-control. So you don't just jump in and blast somebody. That's not the intent. And if you did do it, because, we all know when someone's grappling or sparring for the first time or something, they're either super timid and they don't know how to engage, or maybe they're exact opposite. They're, too aggressive and accidentally hurt somebody. It's not on purpose. It just happens, right? But most people, when they do hurt somebody, there's this wake up call, like, oh man, like, this is real, or I actually did hurt you and I'm so sorry. There's a lot of apologies, and maybe they freeze up, and maybe they go sit on the wall or step off the mat. And I remember one really good instance, and I went to a seminar at a place called the Brazil Academy in Kansas City. Luis Pinto, or Ninja Pinto, owns the place, and great school. And he was hosting a seminar, and Thiago Silva was there, which was super cool. Got to take a picture with him and get to meet him, which was awesome. The UFC fighter, for those that don't know him, look him up, Thiago Silva. But I went a little too hard, and I did an armbar and it hurt somebody, right? Sprained them pretty good, and I felt terrible. So where I had been training at previously in Fort Leavenworth, I was going against all these, big, strong, swole soldiers. Here I am, a young adult, and, in shape, and, I've got my black belt in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu by this point in time. And, yeah, I think I had I didn't quite have my Shodan in Judo yet. Not quite yet. I was a brown belt in Judo for sure. But Ikkyu, I believe. And it's just a lot of emotions, man. Like, here I am at someone else's school, went too hard, I know better, didn't really have enough control. Yeah, sure, I did the technique, but somebody got hurt, and it's embarrassing, and it was actually, Mr. Pinto, who was like, hey, like, it's okay, like, these things happen, and then Thiago came over especially, and, the big mistake was I walked off the mat, right? Like, I was like, I'm so sorry, let me go sit off, and I left. And I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but I just felt terrible. And, between, Ninja and, Mr. Silva and this guy named Lou Veneziano, all awesome dudes. And they were like, hey, man, one, it's rude to step off the mat. Don't give up, come back, keep participating. And, it was really a gut check for me. Like, hey, these guys accepted me. One, there's this mutual forgiveness thing, right? And they're like, hey, you have to forgive yourself too. Like, now you've done the thing, you need to chill out, really focus on what you're doing, have some self-control, make sure you go check on your teammate and make sure they're okay. But, don't baby anybody. Nobody wants to be treated like, a kid, right? On or off the mat. They really want you to give them that respect, as an adult. But of course, you don't want to be a jerk and be like, oh, you'll be fine and go underway. There's that fine line, right? So really doing that gut check and deciding to get back on the mat and keep training and finish this seminar, right? Because I wasn't going to come back. It was a multiple day thing. It was like a 3-day event. It was crazy. There was Friday night and all day Saturday, and then all like half the day Sunday, and I was exhausted by the end of it. But anyways, making sure that you forgive yourself. That's a big part of maturity too, right? So you get over that second hurdle. But the craziest one that I've noticed so far is hurdle number 3, and it's being a coach, right? So when you're entrusted with someone else's care, and of course here in America we have all kinds of insurance and whatnot because legality is a thing, right? But it's another thing to be in the moment when one kid just blasts another kid, or even an adult to another adult. The kids are a little bit closer to home, but adults too, right? And you're like, oh man, did I do something wrong? Did I teach them the wrong thing? Did I not show them the proper technique on how to defend themselves? Did they not know how to fall properly? They didn't know how to escape from this. Should I not have allowed them to do these techniques? Whatever it is. And you begin second guessing yourself again, on your capability level as a coach, and, are you able to keep these people safe? I mean, it's kind of like, if you see someone choking in a restaurant, you're like, oh, I don't know how to do the Heimlich, or I don't know how to do first aid, or whatever the scenario may be. And you feel bad because you're not prepared, right? So, but in some of these situations, like, you can't know everything, right? It's not like everyone knows how to respond to an active shooter. Obviously, like, I'm former law enforcement and whatnot, so one could articulate that if it comes to the actual violence of action piece, that I might have better training than someone else, right? But that doesn't mean that that's the right choice. Same thing with being a coach. Like, yeah, you might have received some type of training or certificate or whatnot on how to do some basic first aid or whatnot. But hey, sometimes people just really get hurt, and it's like, man, like, did I mess up? Another great example is back at Leavenworth again. I had an adults class, and we were doing, working standing chokes and standing arm locks, kensetsu waza, shimi waza, locking techniques and choking techniques, but one gentleman, and then we were also adding throws into the mix too. One gentleman, had a really good underhook and, was going for the arm lock and basically like turned and got, like a cross collar, so under an arm, cross collar, and basically it was kind of like a lateral drop, like in wrestling, but instead had the collars, and like came up and turned and bam, the guy landed right on his shoulder and broke his collarbone. And I mean, it was clear, and they heard it pop, and, he went to the hospital the next day, no, not the next day, that night, and got his x-rays and whatnot, and had to go in the next day for, getting an MRI done and stuff. But it was, the x-rays that night showed him, the collarbone was broken, right? And I remember I couldn't sleep that night, and I felt terrible. They had some minor injuries before that. That was the first, like, oh man, someone, like, broke, under my tutelage. And there are more now that I'm talking about. There's just, there's way more stories I can think of. A guy's shoulder got torn and whatnot, and of course that all sounds terrible, but like, these are natural things, especially because by this point in time I'm brown belt or higher when some of the more severe injuries come. Because hey, you know how higher belts roll. Like, there's a point where we go hard. Like, it's one thing as a white belt or a lower belt in judo, or a white belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, even like blue belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu to an extent, where you're still kind of spazzy, you may not have total control. Yes, I know blue belts in Brazilian jiu-jitsu should have more control, but some do, some don't. It is what it is. They're still learning, right? By purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, your craft should be pretty well refined, right? But in judo, brown belts and above, again, your craft should be pretty well refined. But things happen. But once you're operating at that level and things are moving so fast, accidents happen, right? How many times have you watched ADCC and someone grab a heel hook and just, rip that sucker? And, it's competition. It is what it is. And it's not like they totally care, but like, is that really right? But anyways, as a coach, especially in your dojo or gym or wherever, like, you don't expect people to blast each other and then it happens, or someone's not, intending to hurt one another, and yet it still happens, and you really got to check yourself. But of course, you're still the coach. It's not like you're going to quit coaching, right? Some people do. Some people, really are like that was too much for me. I don't know if I can do this. And usually they don't own like their own gym or something like that. Again, experience, right? At this point in time, you've seen some injuries. You should probably be pretty comfortable in your craft and your trade. But things happen, and it's okay. So being able to reassure yourself that, hey, like, it's okay. This is part of the game. People get hurt in this sport. It is what it is. You just have to have faith that you're teaching the right thing and reassure them, of course, because also as a coach, now you got to go back and reassure the students, like, hey, what you did wasn't wrong. Maybe you did the technique right and they didn't fall right, or, just it was an accident. Part of it is you don't want those students to walk away from the art because they got hurt or hurt someone else, right? It's the reassurance piece. Not only are you responsible for controlling your second guessing, but now you're also responsible for talking to them and reassuring them in their process as well. You don't want them to, go through that dark tunnel and not want to do martial arts anymore. You want them to enjoy martial arts. It's more than just them paying you a fee and you making money. You're kind of a life coach at this point. You're really, you get to know some students and get to talk to them before and after class and on more of an interpersonal level and what their jobs are. And sometimes their whole family is there on the mats. You have the kids in 1 hour and the parents the next hour while the kids are off, hanging out in a corner, playing whatever games they're doing. It is what it is, right? So, and I think all good coaches should kind of know their students a little bit, right? Like, you should know their names, hopefully, and, know which families are there. Just like any coach knows who their good and bad students are, per se, behaviorally or performance-wise, but, like, you still love them all, so to speak, right? They're all your kids. You get them all the same respect. You don't give one more special attention than the other. You talk to them all. Anyways, so you have to reassure them and support them as well as forgive yourself, right? So all that, in my opinion, that's all part of maturity. Seijuku. Shudoku Dan Judo literally means mature student, gentle way, or mature student judo. And, I take that to heart and I truly believe in that. And, for all those that watch this, and practice with me, I hope you guys believe in that philosophy too. And I'm thankful for your support and looking forward to more training.